Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Pieware Homeschool Masterclass. Tonight is a pleasure to have Kevin on. Kevin Nix, he's been with us for 20 plus years. He's a very good designer. He's been a beta tester for us for a long time as well. Kevin, if you give your little bit of background about yourself for your design history.
Okay. I went to school in Oklahoma, went to the University of Oklahoma and got a degree in music education. And then I immediately got certified in Texas, moved to the Rio Grande Valley and started teaching down there at Edinburgh High School. And that opportunity was a way to let me learn to write drill. The band director there needed someone to write drill, and I kind of just volunteered and started doing it. And so it was a way for me to have a group that I could kind of just practice on, really, and trial and error is what kind of took place. And then from there, I moved up to San Antonio and helped open Ronald Reagan High School and taught there from 2000 to 2006. Went to Westfield for a while, went to Georgia, taught at Harrison High School out there, and then came back to here and worked at Hebron and started working around here and with different schools. So awesome. That's kind of the background. And, I met Pi and I think it was 1991. And that's when I started using the program.
Awesome.
So,
well, you said you just kind of dove in and we're using a school as a guinea pig. Where did you learn design? Did you learn that?
I think design comes from just watching and reading and doing a lot of observations. And so early on, it came from, seeing groups at the state championships and watching summer drum corps. And so you kind of just follow, the activity and you pick up things. You kind of go, I like this and I saw that work well. Maybe it would work better with more people, or what if I tried that in a bunch of different groups? And so, design kind of comes from that. And then I think the best thing too is to go out and see stuff that's not in our activity, like Cirque du Soleil shows, Broadway style shows, anything that is a visual spectacle gives you ideas. I remember, some of the early Ronald Reagan shows, we were very inspired by Cirque. And we were going to Vegas and watching those, and a lot of the music came from there. We got to go backstage and see a lot of the costuming designs and, materials, and we used some of that stuff in our shows at that time. So, yeah, that's kind of where, just following the activity.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're talking tonight about the full visual design package. Can you give us an idea of how some of that starts, where you go?
Yeah, I thought I would kind of just go through the process from beginning to end. Most of the programs that I work with now, I see it from the start of the product to the end of the product and all the process in between. So, a lot of people ask, how do you come up with an idea? And my first passion was band directing, so I kind of always come to it from a music first standpoint. I don't tend to find a visual idea and then match it with music. I typically go the other way because I'm more inclined to find music first. Right. So for me personally, I do that more often. That doesn't mean if someone says we want to do a show about Cinderella, well, obviously the idea is already there. And so, then typically it's, how can I do this differently with different music that, people aren't going to expect, and, kind of go at it that way. But to me, the music is where I get the idea from. The music, to me, I see velocity, I see forms, I see color, mood translates into the aesthetics. So the music itself kind of guides that process when it comes to the very beginning and what gives you the idea.
I know we have this question a lot. Do you prefer, or do you use custom music a lot, or are you comfortable with both packaged music as well? Or
yeah, so I've done both. I because of the groups that I work with right now, we use a composer that's more or less I guess assigned to me or works for me exclusively. Not that he only writes for me, but he writes all of my programs is the way I should say that. So yeah, I meet with him and put most of the music together. That doesn't say that I don't do it the other way, because I am writing for a couple of programs who've already bought their music. And so we've gone back to that situation and tailored the music to fit them better. A lot of times when you buy music off the shelf, it might have been written for a different band, and then now you've got it, and it doesn't necessarily tailor to what your needs are in the program, or even what the show is about that you're going to do with that particular music. So I think one of the best things you can do when you buy music off the shelf is take the time to make sure that it's paced correctly and laid out in a way that's going to serve your program best.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great.
And then the next part of that process is, kind of deciding what program fits the school. And I always call that, does the shoe fit? If I have a school that comes to me and, they've got 40 members and they say, well, we want to do Firebird and, all these grand pieces, you have to kind of go, well, we've got to do that in a way that's going to suit the program best. You're not going to create the grand moments that a 200-piece band will. So how do we do Firebird that's going to serve you well as a 40-piece ensemble? And again, it goes back to the composer's ability to tailor that music to fit the visual ideas and actually make it work for the small ensemble or large, or, some bands may be woodwind heavy and they're really good woodwind wise, but their brass are weak, or vice versa. So you kind of have to always look at, let's tailor the music no matter what it is and how it's chosen to fit, the organization.
Right. Along those lines, we have a question here. He has a school that he writes for that only wants to move about 12 times the entire show, and he wants mostly straight lines. Says he finds a struggle to make the show visually appealing. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, and I always say that when the band director or the sometimes they have what they call their visual designer on their staff wants to give you a roadmap to follow. It really is a difficult thing for the drill writer to do when you don't get to just be ultra creative. You have to follow specific ideas they have in mind, and that takes more planning up front before you even start writing. I used to write for a large school actually that pretty much gave me a roadmap every year, and so I found myself actually sitting and almost putting the show together on paper first before I implemented it into Pieware, because I wanted to work out all of those particular things. So my question to Sean would be, when they say they only want to move 12 times, does that mean each person only moves 12 times? Because, the flutes could move, and then the clarinets, and then the trumpets, and then, and that's really only one drill move, but it happened over time. So, the band director could say, everybody go to set 7. Okay, now trumpets, you're going to move there on 1 through 8, and flutes, you're going to move there on 9 through 16, and so on. So it was really only one drill set, but it took place over multiple counts. So when I'm challenged with that kind of a situation, okay, let's make the lines, but let's arrive there at different times and in different groupings and over a period of 32 or 48 counts. So the band director really only has one set to teach, but it just took more time musically. So again, that goes back to, is the music tailored and allows you to do those things,
Right.
So, I hope that kind of answers that question, but to me, you have to be more creative. It's harder to do because you can't just write to the music. You've really got to write to a roadmap that doesn't necessarily align with the music phrases.
Right.
And the other thing is that goes to the next part of the process. So, you have the initial thought of what the music is going to be, and that kind of decides what the show is going to be, And so the next part of that is, for me, I always want to meet with the band director or the person who's in charge of the marching band. And sometimes that's not the band director or the head director, but I always have a design meeting. And I think a lot of times people have that initial design meeting, but they've brought everyone involved with the marching band in the room. And so, you've got 25 people in the room because you've got every marching tech and the cymbal tech and the xylophone tech and all those people. And for me personally, I only want to meet with the person who's going to be the final decision maker on my initial meeting. And I think that's a really important part of the process. We will eventually meet as a big group once we've got more of the smaller questions out of the way. And I want to be able to ask candidly the band director a lot of things about the program, especially if it's my first time to work with them. That's a really important key element. I need to know what the band director's goals are and what he has in mind for the season, without hearing everybody else's thoughts on what that could be, because it doesn't always align, for sure.
Exactly, right.
So that's definitely a big part of it, is that initial design meeting and asking a lot of questions. And what I've found and learned over time, and it was reminded to me last night, the band directors themselves don't always really know what questions to ask me. So I think it's important as a designer to sit down and have a couple of pages of questions that you're going to go through and ask the band directors, just to make sure that you cover as much as you can in that initial meeting, so there's no surprises in the process.
What are a couple of examples of those that help you get an idea of the group itself?
Yeah, well, a lot of things that you want to know as a designer is the strengths and weaknesses, and that's a real obvious one. So you kind of always start with, what are your program strengths, or what are your individual strengths? Because if everybody's in the room, the drum person might say, we've got the best drum line in the country, and the reality is it's not, but they think it is, and the kids believe they are, which is a good thing. That's teaching, that's good teaching if the kids believe that they're doing great things. And the same thing with the guard or the brass or the whatever. So I want to be able to ask the band director specifically what he believes the weaknesses are, because the one in charge that has to make the final decisions and answer all the emails and questions typically has a better reality of telling you, our woodwinds are just, they're not able to play very well, or the guard can't spin together, or whatever. They're really good at letting you know that. And then it kind of comes down to, can we assess why that happens? In this business, a lot of bands are great sitting down inside, and then you see them outside and it's a different ballgame. So it's important to figure out, why does that occur? And that's where those questions come from. I want to know what those questions are. Plus, I also want to know what they thought in the past, because if they're hiring me for the first time, what didn't work for you in the past is an important thing. I always say, and it's the honest truth, the reason the band fails is always the drill writer's fault. If they can't play, it's the drill writer's fault. If they can't march, well, the drill writer did something wrong, and the guard can't spin together and the rifles can't catch. Well, it's because of the drill. And so, you have to be able to address those things and kind of go, well, let's talk about that in specific means and figure out where the key elements are, what they're really good at, because the strengths are important. I want to write to those,
Right.
That's what you do. You design to the strengths of the program. So it's kind of you're putting together a sculpture with a lot of different components, and those things all come together to create the product.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let's talk about some design ideas. I know you have a couple of things queued up for developing over time and things like that. So let's move on to that area.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that. When it comes to, drill design itself, people ask, do you write for small groups, large groups, or, what it is. And I kind of have a good collection of both. I have a 32-piece band that I'm working with. And that's everybody, including color guard, drums. Every single human is, 32. And then, I have a band that's close to 300, and then some in between. So I get to design for a lot of different groups and use the ideas to kind of make that work. But people will ask, certain questions about, like I just described to the person doing the lines. If you can make it develop over time, it really is only one set, but the step-offs caused it to be more music. So if you want to queue up that video of development, and then what you're going to see is the brass on side 2 of the field are really developing drill over the length of phrases. And it really only ends up being about 3 sets that they had to learn for, a good 45 seconds to a minute of music. It's actually a minute. So yeah, we're really kind of watching what happens on side 1 with the straight line across the front.
Is that smooth for everybody? There we go. So if you can kind of walk through what your thought process was here.
Well, so the main thought process was we've got the brass in the front, and the next part of the music, you can't really tell from the MP3, but it was just long playing at forte the whole time. And so we wanted to keep the brass up front. We wanted them to not have to move a lot and not have a lot of set requirements. So I developed them into a spotted set, which also helped put the instruments back together so that when they went into that triangle, now the instruments are closer to like subjects. And then we moved this over time, which allowed that to develop, basically into a triangle, but it took a long time to develop. And it left the brass right in the center of the stage, a good power point, it was all up front, forte the whole time. So, that was a minute of music that really only had 3 sets.
Right.
So that's a, we're looking at another video. You need to
pause it right quick.
Yeah, that was a large school sample. So yeah. Yeah, so the stadium thing to me becomes an issue of like where you're going to compete. So the question is, how do you write for a low stadium? And I will say that most of my groups are in Texas, and that doesn't exist. We don't have such a thing down here for football. Even the little tiny schools have great stadiums. And so I don't really have to deal with that a lot, but I am writing for a group in Pennsylvania, and they do have local shows that they go to that they said will be like 8 or 10 steps, 10 steps high. And so my question to the band director is, what's the pinnacle of the season, and what really matters for the length of time? And, if they tell me, well, the end of the season is Grand Nationals, well, then I'm really going to gear the show to be judged at Grand Nationals, because I don't want to write it, so vertically to be read on a low plane that it doesn't work when you see it from the correct perspective, if you call that correct. But really, if you're dealing with, most stadiums of having 10 or 12 steps high, then you really need to write vertically with a lot of vertical depth. So, you need to spread out front to back as much as you can, and really left to right. And I tell people all the time, create more negative space. It's easier to read when there's more negative space. And so that kind of helps from a judging perspective, me to understand the intent and focus of where you wanted me to look and who's playing and all that stuff, if I don't have to search for it and it's obvious because of the negative space and the pockets you've created. Yeah.
Can you explain negative space a little bit more?
Well, negative space really is just where the winds aren't, or the empty grass on the field, where there's nobody standing. And so, creating more of that allows less density in the forms. And so it allows you to read things clearly. So negative space is really just, empty field, and how you utilize that. It doesn't have to be at the back. It can be side 1, side 2. It could be in the middle of the field, as long as you've given reason for it to be there, musically and visually. So, and that, go ahead.
Well, you were talking about how you're designing for groups that have BOA. We have a question about how many shows do you write a year, and how many is too many before either the work suffers or you suffer, one of the two?
Well, really, it is always the drill writer that suffers, no matter what, no matter how many you do. That's where the problem is, because from my standpoint, I've got to get the product to the director. I am creating their curriculum for the season, and they've hired me to do that. So what kind of got me into the business early on was, having to call the drill writer, and the drill writer didn't pick up the phone, and you were waiting on drill and you didn't know if you were going to get it and how to get a hold of them. And miraculously their phone quit working that time of year and everything else. Right. And so it became a solution to the problem of, if I'm in charge of it, then I can't be late because I've also got to teach that day. And so that's because I started writing my own, then I knew it was going to be on time, and it was going to get delivered correctly. So I feel like it's our responsibility to do that for how many ever we hire. So the gauge is how many I can write, I can get it to them on time, and they're never waiting on me to deliver drill. And I think if you called everyone I've ever written for, it would be hard to find someone who said, we waited on drill, or we had to call him to find drill. Right. So my gauge has always been, what can I deliver on time?
Right.
And so there were years that we were having this conversation earlier. There were years that I would write 20. Right. And I kind of set it at, that's going to be my max. But as the bands get more complex and they get larger and they're competing at a higher level, I can't do that many. So the number started getting smaller for the necessity of being able to deliver a quality product. So now, I try to say 10, but I've actually got 12 right now on paper so far, but 2 of them are done already. Right. So, looking forward from today, I've got 10.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a couple other questions popped up here. Dan asks, he knows that music leads the design, but in your designs, how do you find the balance between symmetry and asymmetry in the drill?
Okay, so that kind of comes down to the ability of the ensemble. Mm-hmm. It's way easier to stand on yard lines at a 4-step interval, so that kind of the ability somewhat dictates what you're capable of doing. One of the first things I do, and this was one of the next steps I was going to talk about, is I actually visit every program I write to. I think it's a disservice for me to take on a school and become their drill writer and never go to the school, never visit the band hall, never see their field, and I need to know their learning environment. And so I take it upon myself to fly to the program and watch the band directors teach throughout the day. I want to hear the kids play sitting down. I want to stand in the classroom. I want to understand the program, the complete environment. And a lot of times that dictates the complexity of the drill.
Right.
Once you see their learning environment and how they're taught, that kind of gives me an idea, even beyond what the directors might tell you. And, a lot of times they want to send you a video. Well, this was our final state performance, and it was in November. What you didn't know is they started last March, and that was, a 7-month process that got them there. Right. And so it's important to know all of those things, when you start, how often do you rehearse, how long the other thing that to me is a big consideration is between your last rehearsal and your next one, how much time goes away. Because if you have a band that only rehearses Monday and Tuesday, and then they have a Friday football game and they don't rehearse again until Monday, right, there's a lot of backtracking that has to go on. So that teaching process is really different than the band that rehearses 2 hours a day every day with a game on Friday, and because the retention is a lot better. So a lot of times that really is the decision maker for the complexity of the drill.
Right.
Did I answer the question correctly? I might have got lost in what the question was.
Dan, does that cover a little bit for you?
So, if you're teaching more difficult drill, that again comes down to the staff. To me, it's a process, and the process begins on day one. And I talk about a lot of directors. What you do on day one of the season kind of dictates the rest of the season. And that first rehearsal, or even the first 2 or 3 rehearsals, is nothing but procedure. Right. And, a lot of times a band director will tell me, well, I want to learn at least the opener in the first week of band camp. And I personally don't take a lot of those groups because it probably isn't going to go well if that's the learning process. Sometimes the program and the environment dictates they have to do that. Mm-hmm. I worked for a band last year that had to learn everything in summer band because once school started, they only rehearsed 1 night a week.
Oh, wow.
So summer band was their only time to really get a lot of retention to happen. So, that's a different process. But in general, the first rehearsal establishes the procedure for the season. And so I tell a lot of people how you're going to rehearse and how you're going to teach drill is really dictated by that first day.
Right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
We have a question pop up from Aaron. If you go to see each of the groups, how do you budget for that, especially if a plane ticket's involved?
Well, and plane tickets are typically involved with most of them. And to me, it's just part of the fee they pay for the product. If someone's going to pay, let's say they're paying $10,000, and I'm just making up an amount, but if they're paying me $10,000, the least I can do is spend $400 on a plane ticket and go visit them for a day. And if I have to stay in a hotel, then there's, another $150, but it's a very small percentage cost on my end to be way better prepared to deliver them a quality product. Now, if the school's only paying me $1,000 and it's going to cost me $600 to fly there, well, that's a whole different story. That makes the process different. But to me, part of the cost of what they're paying me for is me visiting the program at least one time.
Right.
I definitely want to see. I need the information. And the best way to get the information is to stand in the band hall, walk on the practice field, understand the environment. If you realize there's a train that goes by every 20 minutes in rehearsal and they have to stop while it goes by because you can't hear, well, that 2 hours isn't really 2 hours anymore.
Right.
And so all those things become really important in the learning process, and for the writer especially, to make sure you're delivering what they can do.
Right. As part of the visual package that you work with, do you only provide the music and the drill, or do you also provide costume ideas, things like that?
So yeah, for me, with the programs that I do, I'm doing every part of the program from beginning to end. So once the music is chosen, and I'm a big component of choosing the musical product, I typically put the music together and create the initial music sketch. That sketch then goes to the composer, and the composer and I go back and forth quite a bit to tailor it towards the visual idea. Right. Once the music is created, then that musical product starts putting together, in the time that the music's being written, I'm also working on visual concepts, a field sketch, if they're using props or not, and what those are going to look like, and then putting together also costume design. So I also fly to Dance Sophisticates every year, and I sit down with them, and for every program, we design every flag and every color guard costume. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't get adjusted. Okay. Right. So I'm not going to say that whatever I design, they have to use or they're going to use. It doesn't work that way. The initial ideas are put together. So I'm selling an entire package, really, the drill, the costuming, the prop designs, the field layout. And then also, I don't sell the music, but guiding the music process so that it's tailored to the visual design. So yes, to answer that, the guard costumes and flags, and even the band tops, if we're doing that, are also designed at that time so that everything is cohesive. And I think that's a part of it that becomes real important, especially at the really competitive level. If you go into a situation where the costumes are made by one person who didn't communicate to the music guy, who didn't talk to the drill writer, who didn't talk to the prop designer, they all come up with different ideas, and they're all good, but they didn't cohesively work together. So I kind of just unify all of that. And for the programs who are hiring me right now, that's what they're actually wanting me to do. So I'm not saying you have to do that at all. I'm just saying that that's the situations that I'm in.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it really comes down to the first thing you need to teach is the fundamental of the day and how the procedure is going to go and how the rehearsal is going to go. And that establishes then how it's taught. Right.
And then how you design it based on what they have available to them.
Exactly. Yeah. How it's designed is kind of comes down to how well they can learn.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a question from Gary. Do you ever write complete shows before the drill is delivered? And if you do, how do you handle number changes?
So in general, it's an interesting question because you and I've talked about this a lot. If I have to go back and remove 10 people, how it just destroys everything that was done. So luckily, most of the programs that I'm writing for have a crew that is not in the competitive marching unit in some way. And that's not to say that those kids are standing on the sideline, because I'm very much a proponent of using every single body that you have as in band, especially if you're charging them money to do the activity, which most are. So every kid needs a role. And sometimes that role is, setting the field, helping set the field. And I don't want to say just a prop mover, because we have that conversation all the time. I don't want my kid just moving a prop. Well, that is a very integral part of a show if they're incorporated correctly. So sometimes those props take on a whole life of their own. And I know schools where kids audition to be on the prop crew because it's such a big component of the show, and it's a really cool thing, and it becomes a stepping stone. So those kids have drill. They learn coordinates just like everybody else, and they have to learn sets. It's just not as many, and it's not as hard. They're not having to play at the same time. So I've been in programs where as a freshman, the kids were given the opportunity to volunteer to be in the competitive unit or not. And 80% of them would choose to not be in the competitive unit because it was so difficult. Musically, visually, it was so challenging. As a freshman, they couldn't do it.
Right.
And so they got to be a part of it without having to really be stressed out over that part. Right. So, in general, I don't do a lot of number changes. It's easier if you're changing the number of guard. If people tell me we're going to have 25 and they have 40, I go, yay, let me go ahead and put those 40 in. Right. If we thought we had 40 and now it's 12, then I go, oh God, all the ideas are out the door. We've got to go back and rethink this, and so those aren't as fun to do when it's, taking away. But wind wise, I don't have to do a lot of that because I'm really specific about getting a director to make a decision that fits the projected band. Rarely does a band go from 150 to 300 in a year. And rarely do they go from 150 to 80 the next year, unless there's a reason, another school opened or something, and you can project that. But in general, if you're writing for a band that's got 64 woodwinds and 64 brass, and next year they got 20 more kids in the program, you might go up to 70, 72, 72 or something, but you're not going to suddenly have so many more kids.
Right.
So I really talk to the band directors a lot. And right now, this time of year, those conversations are being had. They're sending me their numbers of, this is what we have on the roster. This is what we marched last year. What do you think we should look at doing this year? Right. And so I kind of help guide that process.
Understand. Yeah. You were saying that you had talking about prop movers. I know we have an example of one of the shows that you're working on currently for the large band. Could you kind of talk through those, a few of the design ideas on how you implemented that?
Yeah. So let's talk about the small band, because they're actually utilizing props in two different ways. Okay. And that'll kind of give us both ideas. So for this small band that I'm working with of 32, each kid is actually going to have a prop that they're responsible for. And then we also have a stage set. Now, this is a band with a small budget, so we're not talking about spending a lot of money, but they've bought these from other programs. Mm-hmm. So everything they're buying is actually repurposed. And, we've changed color and we've changed the look of it, but it's being used again. So it costs them very little money. Right. And so, each band member has this little green symbol that they're going to replace and use throughout the show. And they're going to move those around, which makes the band look really large. You'd never know this is a 32-piece band. Right. And so it helps give the band more depth and a little bit more variety. The color guard's small, but it fills out the stage in this particular situation. They're starting a color guard for the first time. So, this was a way for them to try it. This small group comes to the front. That's all of their woodwinds. So that's what they have for the woodwind ensemble. Right. And the rest in the back is brass, and they don't have any marching percussion. They're putting them all in the pit. So we stage the front ensemble, which is now really the back ensemble, on the field. It kind of takes up more space.
Right.
So that was kind of the idea there. So they've got movable props, but they've also got stationary props to fill out the field. And it makes a small band look really creative. And that band will compete with bands that are, 150, and it gives them at least a little bit of an element of it's creative. It looks a little different than everybody else. And it kind of stands out as being special when they go up against the other big bands.
Right. So
yeah,
we have a couple of questions here.
Yep.
We have a creating drill for a small program where we've got an example here. You want to create great moments for the judges. So can you kind of go into that? I know you explained interacting with the props and expanding the numbers here.
Yeah. So, this right here is a really good example of that. This whole beginning where the winds are moving around the props, the only thing happening is a flute solo, and, it's accompanied by the front ensemble.
Right.
So all of that is just a soloistic moment that becomes a real visual thing. And we're going to do so much more with those than what happens on the drill set. We're going to lean them side to side, ripple them up and down. They're actually a different color on the other side. So just turning them allows you to do that too. Right. And, let's say you don't have the props on the field. My hope is that even when they're not there, the drill itself is interesting enough to still keep the judges' interest and guide their eye to the featured thing. So when the triangle opens up, the soloist is left in the center of the field. That way a judge doesn't say to me, I hear the solo, but I can't find them. And right. I've heard that comment so much. It's one of those things that drives me nuts. But and then even like this, when the drill starts moving, I want the drill to tell me that the next thing that's happening is a woodwind feature. So now all the woodwinds are in the front and the arc. They're framed by the color guard. It should be very obvious what the focus is, both musically and visually.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had another question. If they've got a small group, but they actually don't have color guard, what would your suggestions be? How would you highlight something like this without having color guard?
Yeah, so this is interesting because this drill is written in a way that the color guard can be taken out because they are not sure they're going to have one either. Okay. They're starting it for the first time. They're guessing at having at least 10 people, maybe 12. And so that's in there, but it was also written to take them out.
So you could completely write that without them.
Yeah. So you could, if you watch the drill and there wasn't any color guard in there, it's still obvious where the focus is because the woodwinds still create the arc. The props are still used, and it gives you an element of visual intrigue. So the props almost become like the color guard, because what we can do with those by leaning them over and turning them becomes a color change or a color flash. Exactly. The next section of the show is actually the slower movement, and we're going to lay them down on the ground and create circles and pockets and feature moments for vignettes. And so whether there's a color guard or not, I think this will be intriguing.
Right.
That's the hope.
And then Bobby is asking us a similar question: tips for writing for bands with large wind section, full percussion, but only 4 to 6 guard.
Well, so let's watch the big band design.
Sure.
And here's a good tip, because I'm kind of in that situation with this band. Okay. So this particular school is kind of in that same situation in that they've got a lot of wind players and not a lot of guard members. So that color guard you're seeing on the field is very hopeful that what you're seeing right now is more realistic for this band. In the 12 to 15 range for a band of this size is more realistic. But as what's coming on right now is actually woodwind players that are going to do large streamer flags. So everything on the field right now is a wind player because the guard is actually in the front on rifle. And there's a few guard members left in the back to do flag after these people leave. Right. So my suggestion in those situations, and I've been in that situation a lot where the band is really good and they just can't grow the color guard yet, or they're working on it, but they've had turnover or whatever. And so what I've always recommended is, pick a section. Let's have the flutes do some kind of swing flag in the opener, just on the first couple of arrivals, because as a judge, when you get those initial arrivals like that and they're grand, you're almost forgiving for the next part of the drill if the color guard is suddenly only 12 or 15. You know, now, so 4 to 6 is a little bit rough, because with a band of that size with only 4 to 6 guard members, you've got to utilize those people longer.
Right.
And so I would say, let's try using the flutes in the opener. Let's see if we could use the clarinets in the ballad. Maybe they're not as featured, or maybe the trumpets don't play in the ballad. Maybe the percussion become, swing flag members, or they hold up a prop or something. It doesn't have to be a flag. If you're doing a show about, money or something, they hold up dollar signs, just something that's a visual element that they could utilize and be a part of the drill in a way that would give some focus. So hopefully that answered that question, or at least maybe sparked an idea.
Well, we have a question about our current environment. Are you concerned about the drill that you're writing not making it on the field this year? How does it affect your remuneration, and how is that happening?
So I've had those conversations with band directors so far, and everybody kind of is under the assumption that we're going to use it this year in some way. If school starts late or whatever, we'll use it when we can. And if not, and we don't have a football season, we'll put that in the pocket and it'll become the following year's show. Right. So far, nobody has told me, don't write, stop writing, we're not going to do it. Because there's not been a definitive answer yet where everybody said there will be no football season.
Right.
I think way more would have to happen for there to not be football in Texas.
Right.
It's going to take more than a COVID, I think.
Right. So, exactly. Right.
Yeah. So my opinion is, if there's football, they'll be banned in some form.
Right.
So, there may not be anybody to watch, but we'll still do it.
We'll still do it. Right. We have a question coming from Dan. When you started drill design and competition bands, how important were the judges' comments in your learning curve?
Boy, that question is very twofold. If I know the director's reputation, that opinion has more meaning to me.
Okay.
And so I judged on the BOA level for 17 years, and in all captions, both music and visual. And so if you've got somebody who has a reputation of judging many, many years and giving quality comments, and their bands have been really great, and I can admire what they've done over time, that helps me appreciate what they're telling me.
Right.
So I don't necessarily write to the judges' comments. So people say, do you write to the sheets? Well, in some instances, yes. If a band tells me we're trying to make finals at Grand Nationals, or we're trying to win Grand Nationals, then absolutely it is my job to write to those sheets. I want to check every box I possibly can on those sheets, because again, my responsibility is giving the band director the best curriculum for their success.
Right.
And so that's where that really comes to play in. If someone tells me we're only going to local shows around here and we just want a good entertaining show, that's probably not going to check many boxes on the sheets necessarily. It's going to give me the opportunity to maybe just, have them stand a little longer, or, just utilize the field differently.
Understood.
Yeah.
Great. We have a couple of questions here that kind of fold together. What are the musical components you listen for in a composition to determine what you're going to do visually?
Originality.
Originality.
Originality is the first thing. Yeah. What was the rest of the question?
And the secondary question, it kind of follows up. How do you set up the drill when the music has few impact points or hits?
When it has few?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's funny, because the composer that I work with, when I tell him in this moment I need 48 counts of Disney, he knows what that means to me now. And so it kind of comes down to, if you've ever been to Disney and you watch the fireworks show at night, the music is so grand and big and amazing. You kind of need those moments in the show. And let's say you're doing a Schwantner piece, and there is none of that in there. And I love Schwantner and I want to do it, but you do have to manufacture those moments. And so you do have to be able to talk to the composer and tell him explain to them what those moments are. Is it a brass arrival? Is it woodwinds? Is it, it could be a solo, a great, huge, massive build that's going crazy. And then all of a sudden the bottom drops out and it's just a flute. That can be a major impact musically. So it comes down to talking to the composer. And then what I look for is complete originality. I really try to stay away from any music idea that I've actually judged. In 17 years, I've judged it, more than 17 times. I don't want to do it,
Right.
and that's just me. I know how I feel as a judge when I hear the band come on and they're doing, the Firebird again or the New
Right.
World Symphony. And it's like, that's great literature. It's amazing, but you better do it better than the Cavaliers did New World, or you better do it better than blah, blah, blah. And that's just kind of what happens as a judge when you're sitting there. You have such expectation because everybody's seen their favorite performance of those particular things. So I really am always searching for music that very few people know or haven't heard or hasn't been done on the field yet, or, something like that. So for me, it's always the first thing is how original is it?
Right.
Now, if someone says to me, I want to do Rhapsody in Blue, okay, we're doing Rhapsody in Blue then.
Sounds good. Right.
We're gonna do it differently than in some way.
Right. Wonderful. We have a question from Jim here. If you're giving advice to a new drill writer, what would be the top 3 design tools writers should get good at?
Well, I morph everything almost. I'm a proponent of the morph tool for some reason. It just seems to be the easiest for me to quickly move things around. And when I'm writing, I tend to just kind of shove things where I think they need to be on the field first. So I don't necessarily think I want those brass to go to a triangle. I just know that I want them to be on side 2 in a form on the 30 near the front.
Right.
But it didn't necessarily need to be a triangle at first. So the first thing I'm doing is plotting where people are going to go. And the first group I plot is the color guard. So I work backwards. A lot of people don't think that way, but I feel like I've got to stage the visual element first. If you don't have a color guard, well, that's different. But I literally want to stage the color guard first in the next moment of arrival or feature. So if I've got the next thing coming up is a trumpet feature, where the trumpets are going to be and how the guard is going to get there is the most important thing. So I'll plot that first, and I'll first put the color guard where it can easily move to and look the best, and then get the trumpets there.
Right.
And then everybody else becomes secondary to that design. That's kind of the way that goes. So I don't know if I answered that question well, but that's kind of the way I go about that process.
Wonderful. Morph.
Yeah, I morph. And then I also, I use the push tool because I'll just grab things and push them where I want them, and then start morphing them into shapes. So, maybe the first thing is just to circle and slide it somewhere on the field and just push it where I want them to be. And then morph them into a solid block or a triangle or concentric circles, or, if it's a solo, how do I want that solo to be featured? Are they circled? Are there arcs behind the solo? So that's kind of how I do it. And so those writing tools typically become push and morph more than anything else. I would say probably 90% of the time.
Right.
I use the morph tool a lot.
Right. Dan asks, when you're writing mini drills, how do you resist writing the same forms transitions for the different bands?
Well, that's an interesting question because I think everybody has a style and ideas that they really like and use. And I've talked about this lately because there's been a lot of people ask about the creative process and, where it comes from. And a lot of times, creativity grows out of first imitation and then making them your own. And so I personally don't feel bad if I'm using an idea that I created, 8 years ago or 3 years ago, or even last year for one band. And now I'm using it in another band and it's in a different place on the field, but it's kind of the same idea. I don't think that's necessarily bad. I also don't think that there's a there's not forms that are taboo or belong to anybody. I mean, a block is a block. Concentric circles are concentric circles. So, if I'm using them in a way that makes it work for the feature or that moment, then who's to say that it's, 10 other people didn't do concentric circles that year. It's just an idea. It's an element of design. Everybody has lamps in their house in some form. They're all different lamps, but we all have lamps. So it's kind of the same thing with drill. We're all going to probably come to a block or an arc or a circle or a line. All those things are going to happen.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think the goal is to make sure that I don't have, bands going to a contest and they all look like they're doing the same show with different music. So I do take that in consideration, because here in the area, I write for 4 or 5 bands that will all compete at the same area contest. Right. And I don't want it to be, band 5 is now in jeopardy because we've now seen the show 4 times before and it all looks the same. So I do try to make them substantially different from one another if I know they're going to see each other. That becomes a really important thing.
Right. We have a question from Russ. Since you're talking about originality in the music, if you're working with music such as pop tunes, popular classics, how do you work for that by searching for originality in music? How do you compensate for that, since the music is already known?
Yeah, I don't write for any colleges at all. I've helped people that are in that situation. I helped a group last year, and they were doing a show and they wanted to do a race car on the field and have it travel down the field with the wheels turning. And so I wrote that moment for them because that particular drill writer didn't know how to, put a car on the field and have the wheels rotate as it went downfield. But to me, the music, college band is so different because your crowd dictates what your music is most of the time. I mean, I went to the University of Oklahoma. Our only goal was to entertain the audience and make fun of the other one. The other team. So the show was always in some way, to get our crowd excited and to make fun of the other crowd, the other band in some way, or the other crowd in a way that we knew and the other crowd maybe didn't know. But that's kind of what it was all about. So
the biggest inside joke.
Yeah, right. We all knew, and we had a good time with it.
Exactly. So, right.
Yeah. But, the college bands, you kind of have to, you play to your audience more than high schools do. High schools are really competing. So we typically play to the judges more than the high school crowd. And college bands really are playing to the crowd. So depending on where you are, what part of the country you're in, and what your crowd is like, that's probably going to dictate whether it's a jazz show or country or, pop music. All those things are important, You
were discussing that you stage the guard first. Can you give tips on guard staging? I know that we've got a couple examples of that.
I do.
So how it works best.
Yeah. So, to me, I want to saturate the field with color or create focus with color. So the color guard staging becomes uber important, especially in the competitive realm and especially on the BOA sheets where, the visual side of things is 60%. And so you really have to think about that element in a different way or a unique way. And so for me, I want to stage them first because the music can, potentially come from anywhere. So if I need to get the guard into the center of the field to be featured on this particular loud jazzy moment, maybe the winds are all in a tight block down on the 30, turn towards the press box, but the guard's on the 50. So I want to work that out first before I have to do anything else. So there's a couple examples here of, 2 different ways to stage the color guard. And so we can look at those and I can kind of talk through them as you go.
Here's your version 1.
So in version 1, the color guard is kind of its own separate element. It kind of takes on the design idea of more like, the drum line. It doesn't really intermix with the winds, and it doesn't take up any space that the winds would be in.
Mhm.
It still provides a color element and it still has some impact, but it isn't cohesive with the rest of what's happening on the field.
Right.
And so that's kind of what version 1 does. You can see the features. There's the small circle feature, and then there's the square feature over to the right that happens next. And the color guard is just basically spinning musically to what's happening from both elements.
Right.
But they kind of take on their own space. You know,
Right.
they're filling out the field, so it makes the field look bigger. And they're taking up more of the negative space of the field, and they're being utilized in a variety of ways. You know, you might have a single soloist run through the 2 lines that we see, or, you know, there's ideas you could do ripples towards the front and back, and that becomes a really cool thing to look at. You know, is it as musical or not? It fills out the field for the last arrival.
And we've got the version 2 here.
So version 2 approaches it more of a holistic design. So the color guard is staged first and becomes the element that is uber important to the music. So when we get to this, it's the same amount of people. It's exactly the same number, but the color guard now looks more grand. It takes up more of the field, and you have more of color saturation.
Right. And being on the judging side of that, do you find one way is more appealing to judges?
Yeah, absolutely. The coordination of elements is always one of the top things in a box 5 on a judge's sheet. So in this particular instance, we're looking at the triangle over to side 1 is, you know, spinning to the music that the low brass feature is doing. And now the high brass feature happens over on side 2. And that group over there takes up that element while the other group transitions into the next moment. So you have a lot of simultaneous things happen, and there's never a moment of simplicity in that design. It's not one versus the other. It's not a separate idea. It's a holistic idea. So the winds and the color guard and the percussion and are all working simultaneously as one thought.
I see.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Let's see here. Okay. So
we have another. There's another video.
Another video. So many. All right. Another question here. The video we're going into, can we reveal, can Kevin reveal how they pulled off the plume color change at Reagan?
It's funny when so do you want to play that? Because people might not know what it is. I don't know. That was
pop that back up here.
That was 8,000 years ago. So it's really funny how that came about. I went to the TBA convention, and we were looking for a fluorescent orange plume, and nobody made them at the time. You couldn't get any plumes in any colors. And so the only organization that said, I think we can do that, was Fred J. Miller. And it was actually Fred himself who said, I think we can make them in any color. And so that's how that all came about, was to do that particular moment.
Right.
Because at the time, plumes came in like 4 colors. And so people hadn't really done that. And then when it happened, there was a whole thread of how there was speculation, and, you know, it was heat sensitive. So when it came out, it got cold and it made it change colors and all. It kind of took on a life of its own, and it became the identity of that band at that time. And, you know, that's the Ronald Reagan Band, and they're amazing. Still today, one of the best bands in the country, I think, and certainly have created their own identity now. But at the time, that was, you know, one of the elements that became the identity of that program. And then the following year, we went to Grand Nationals a couple of years. And so because we did it the first year, people asked, you know, are you going to bring it back? And so, you know, how do you do it again and make it a surprise? So the goal then was, well, we've certainly got to make it bigger and better. And, you know, there's got to be more colors and all that kind of stuff. So,
well,
and it was,
getting
ahead.
some messages here that we are having a little bit of streaming issue. So if you're having trouble seeing that video, I've posted some links in the chat as well. We've got a storm moving in. But so explain how you made this one. It looks like you have multiple different colors of plume here.
So you want to give the secret away. You're asking the magician to give the secret away. I don't think we ever do that. We never do that, do we? It's really simple. The tube that the plume is sold in is cardboard, and we wrap the tube of cardboard with black feathers, a black feather boa. So the real plume is actually inside the cardboard thing that it's stored in, and we just wrapped black feathers around the cardboard.
Oh.
And that's how we did it. Now, the next year when they changed multiple times, the kids actually had a second plume in their sleeve that was held on by, the parents were genius, so they could build all these devices. So in this particular year, every kid has a different color, and then they all have a unison color. And the unison color was up their sleeve, and their original color was under their plume. And so that's how that worked. They just switched them out. And, you know, that came down to allowing the kids on the ground enough time musically to make the switch. So the music had to be tailored in a way that allowed it to happen.
Right.
So it's funny that was what, 2003, I think. We're still talking about it.
Hey, it's a big impact.
Yeah. So yeah, for many years I was the
another question here. Do you give the guard instructor the ideas of what to do on the guard work?
Not in every situation. And a lot of times I ask them to send videos, and I'll give feedback. But you know, in general, I try not to, you know, I don't want to spoon feed every count. But you know, if the music got really big and they decided to do, you know, a winter guard idea of dropping the flag and rolling to the ground and standing up dramatically, outdoors, that's not going to be as great as it would have been in a gym in a small environment. So I will recommend they make changes like that, and you know, and say that's not going to be a grand enough a moment for what's happening musically. The two have to match, you know. So if it's not visually matching, we've got to make a change. So, but yeah, I mean, in general, I try to guide the ideas and ask for videos and give feedback.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you'd like to touch on? Are there any other questions that we have for Kevin in your design process? Are we through all of your check boxes?
No, not everything, but we got through most of them.
Is there anything that you'd like to add in? Any importance? Anything
of importance? You know, for me personally, I think as a designer, we've got to give every band we've got to be the catalyst to their success. And so when I sit down to write drill, I have to make sure that the band can actually accomplish it musically. And so that goes back to square one. You know, the music is decided almost always first, because I have to know that they're going to be musically successful. You know, most judges will tell you they hate watching a visual product that's, you know, incredibly beautiful and brilliant, but the soundtrack is so bad they don't want to look at it. So I've always come from the other side. Being a band director first, I just tend to come from the music side and make sure that we have great musical products first, and then hopefully the visual matches those music products, you know.
Great.
So
do we have any other additional questions for Kevin? Any other magic that we want to reveal?
That's sad. Nobody do a plume trick this year.
I know we had one other video queued up. It was kind of a picture show idea. Let's show that right quick.
Yeah, this band, the concept last year was thorns remain. So it was basically the idea of when a rose is beautiful, but what's left is a stem of thorns when the rose is no longer there. And I think that's the one you're queuing up, right?
I believe so. It's the
yeah. So in the ballad portion of the show, there was a woodwind feature that was going to take place, and you know, this is a really large band in Missouri. and or Missouri, depending on where you're from. And so we wanted to feature the woodwinds, but also kind of tell the show, tell what the concept was. And, you know, the props were just thorns. So a lot of times it took a while, but, you know, we created the rose, and then that was all soloistic musically as the band transitioned into that. And then the rose starts losing its petals, basically, is what took place over time. And then and what it led to was a woodwind feature. So the brass are basically in the stem, the percussion are in the leaves at the back of the rose, and then the woodwinds are at the rose that is melting. So there was a solo going on musically that allowed the rose to basically lose its petals over time, and also set up the woodwind feature. And it was a great moment for me to put all the woodwinds back in like instruments as well. You know, so now all the woodwinds are kind of back, like all clarinets are together, flutes and all that stuff that had got a little bit mixed up throughout the drill. And now they open up into a feature. And, you know, it was obvious that the girl in the center had a giant rose and held that up. And then, you know, all the flags had big roses on them. And so that's kind of what that moment was. It was, they were actually double flag roses is what they were. And so that was a moment of kind of a pictorial idea that helped sell the concept.
The whole show concept.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that also developed over time. So, you know, it was, the solo was long, but it allowed the drill to kind of, you know, through time develop, and you just kind of saw it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
We have, looks like a couple of questions here. What are some of your favorite moments that you've designed?
Anything at Ronald Reagan.
Anything at Reagan.
Well, like one of my favorites was probably the Hebron show Sculpt. That was a couple of years ago. You actually have that video. And I think my favorite of all time, if I had to pick one that was my favorite, it was William Mason when they did the winter solstice, and the field was covered in snowflakes, and, you know, it was all just winter music. But musically and visually, that was probably one of my favorites of all time. So when people ask me, you know, favorite show ever, it's always the Mason show.
The Mason show. Hey, that works.
Yeah, the winter solstice show.
Well, are there any final questions for Kevin before we sign off for tonight? Thank you all so much for stopping by. Kevin, it's a pleasure. It was a wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been awesome. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a Q&A. That was one of the things that was requested for night school. So we will see y'all tomorrow night. Kevin?
All right.
I'll see you tomorrow night too.
All right. Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening, guys.